Hi, welcome to Expert Talks. This is the first episode of interview with Analytics, AI, and Transformation Leaders. My name is Mahadevann Iyerr, Mahaa for short. I'm your host for today. I'm the co-founder and CEO of an intelligent marketplace for on-demand actionable analytics. Our guest for today is Mr. Pankaj Rai. Pankaj is the Group Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Aditya Birla Group. He has had an illustrious career spanning Wells Fargo, Dell, TESCO, and GE Capital. If one were to talk of some of the leading analytics and transformation leaders in India, I'm sure Pankaj would be up there. So thank you, Pankaj, for joining us and making time. Thank you.
Thanks, Maha. Thanks for having me here.
So, Pankaj, I had a few questions before that. I wanted to share an incident very recently. So when I started this, I decided to start this venture, I was speaking to a senior industry friend, getting some advice. And so he was suggesting a few names whom I should talk to. And he said, you know what, I will also introduce to one Mr. Pankaj Rai. And I said, I know Pankaj. And he started smiling and said, who doesn't know Pankaj? So my first question is that, whenever, you extremely network, you're connected with people. And more importantly, whenever I speak to someone about you, their faces light up. There is a level of respect and affection that is there when they talk about you. So I just wanted to understand, what was the type of intrinsic qualities, habits, behaviors that you feel that you have been able to make this type of connection?
Thanks, Maha. That's a great question, and I'll kind of abstract that question to saying that many a times when you see the outcomes or the results, and in this case, your interaction with some people who have an opinion about me, why that outcome happened or how that happened, sometimes is not very clear. Right? We sometimes see the outcome, but how it happened and why it happened, and most of the time people imagine that those outcomes were very thought through and very intentional, and there's a framework and a formula behind it. And from whatever I have observed, that many a time many of these outcomes are just a sometimes serendipity, sometimes a combination of various factors, and there was no sort of plan or framework that someone was planning to. So in this particular case, I can talk about myself. I never knew or I never intended to be a network person. In fact, I still don't remember, but sometime when someone told me that, you know what, you're very networked. I read this book called The Tipping Point. I don't even read too many books. And I said, okay. He said that tipping point describes various personalities. I thought of you as that, I don't know whether it was called the connector or some such character in that book. I said, okay. So, and then many other people started telling me that you are very networked. So I said, okay, looks like whatever I'm doing, and this is called networking, although I didn't think of it that way, right? So I think the point I'm trying to make is that I have been doing, and I think many people must be doing things that they think are right, trying to do a few things, and then the outcome can be interpreted or articulated in many different ways, and they are all right ways of articulating. I'm not saying that. It's just that I didn't have a model for networking. I did a lot of things. One of the characteristics of my activities can be qualified as networking, which wasn't intended to be. Now, the question is, what was my formula or what was I trying to do? Now, that also, it wasn't as if it was very intentional, but when I reflect and look back, what I have been trying to do, which has manifested itself into various objectives about whether people's face getting lightened up or whether they think I'm a network person or many other explanation that people might have about me. But I can tell you what my own reflection of what I was doing. So my career, now about 30 odd years, because we just had a 30-year class reunion. So it's a nice number to have. We just all met in Goa and we were all reflecting on our careers post our college. So in that reflection, I think in my case, I didn't, have any specific ambition about what I wanted to be, or so usually in MBA classes people have some aspirations of being a VP at some age, or a business leader at some other age, or retire at some other age. Somehow I didn't have any such ideas, and I wasn't also too fussed about not having that idea. So what did I do? I tried to do what made sense at any point in time. So I was kind of just optimizing my decision making based on what just came next. So all my job changes, the first one came from campus, because in campus, you get, so by the way, the first job I had two offers on day 4 of college campus, which is actually quite bad, because then you're saying you're probably going to be unemployed. One of them was to sell light bulbs for Wipro. The other was to do consulting for Feedback Ventures, a consulting company. And my friends told me, and I used to be a pretty reticent person back then, they said, sales though you can't do, forget it. And light bulb is such a difficult product to sell. You are better off in this consulting firm, where at least you'll do some analysis or something and get away with it for some time and then see what I have to do. So it was more of elimination than aspiration that led to that. And subsequently also, I think ICICI was my next job, which happened because after a while I felt that I'm advising people on what to do in terms of management consulting, having had no experience. And a friend of mine said that ICICI is a great place. We do project financing. We talk to large businesses, founders, CFOs. We get a good sense of how real businesses work. And I said, that sounds logical. And that's how I went there. The move from there to GE Capital happened again very, incidentally, someone was there and they said, this is a multinational company and you are getting married, you need to get paid more to take care of your wife who is not supposed to be working. And ICICI wasn't a great paymaster. So combination of those factors led me to that other job. And similarly, every subsequent job there was some friend who said, I think this might be the next right move for you. And I trusted their advice and it turned out to be well. I also think that I learned that having the right people and the right environment around me was more critical than what the job was called. So when people say, how did you choose data analytics, or how did you choose Dell, or how did you choose anything else? I don't think I was choosing a company or a function. I think I was inherently choosing people and culture, but I didn't know it back then. So, but when I reflect, I said, yeah, how did I choose that? Oh, yeah, so and so called me. I liked him and I liked his approach, and I said, let's do it. When I was asked to do analytics by someone, I didn't know A of analytics at that time, but I liked the guy who asked me to do it, and I thought it'll be interesting. So I was trying out new things and working with people that I thought I could relate to. Now, that has probably led me to meeting a lot more people, which I have done. And whenever I meet someone, I try to learn something from them. If they have something, I try to share something that I know which they can benefit from. So I think my approach, again, on reflection, it wasn't as if it was planned. The common theme is that when I meet someone, let's say I'm meeting you, I'll try to see what I can learn from you, what Maha is good at. Let me ask him those questions. Let me learn from him. And then see if Maha needs some advice on an area that I'm good at and that he needs help on. Let me share that. I think I can help that. And then say, hey, let's be in touch. And if you need any help, let me know. And when people reach out to me, I'm very quick to respond. So I think this combination of, learning, sharing, and offering to help has probably given rise to this reputation that so and so is a good person and network person and so on and so forth. Although, like I said, I wasn't focusing on those outcomes. I was just focusing on being curious and compassionate and communicative and so on and so forth. So maybe a much longer answer, Maha, than what you may have expected, but that's how I would describe my behavior so far.
Yeah, no, absolutely get it. I think it is intrinsic. It is about being genuinely willing to learn, share, and being responsible. And I can vouch for it. I think in the years that we have known, whenever I've reached out to you, your response has been absolutely prompt. And I'm thinking I've not reached out to Pankaj for 2 years. I'm sending him a WhatsApp and I get a response in 5 minutes. I think it is just, that muscle habit that is there in terms of being genuine and sharing and, being responsible. So thanks, Pankaj. I had another question. In fact, part of it you answered in your earlier one. So one question is, you moved across industry domains. For example, GE Capital was a outsourced, services center. Stanchart was a, shared service center. Then you moved to Dell as director of analytics, right? A computer hardware manufacturer. Wells Fargo, one of the top 4 banks, and now Aditya Birla, which is a conglomerate. And in analytics and transformation, we keep saying that context is very important, domain knowledge is very important. So what are some of the approaches and frameworks that you have taken? And you've done well, very well across all these different domains. So what are some of your approaches that you have taken to, build, the domain knowledge, capability, situation knowledge for yourself and your team? Are there any approaches that you can talk about?
Yeah. So I think, the first part of your question, which is related to a lot of changes that have happened, partly I think in our MBA classes, we are sort of told that we are creating general managers and you guys can do anything. So some of it also comes from there, that it is sort of drilled into your head that you have been a management graduate, and a management graduate is a general purpose machine which can be deployed in many different situations. Whether it is right or not, I don't know, but at least that is the general notion that is propagated, and all of us MBAs think that we can do anything, we are superhuman. So to that extent, I think career changes or job changes of various varieties happen because people also trust that, oh, you are an MBA and you can do that. Secondly, I think I was fortunate to have some good colleges in my CV. So again, there's a lot of correlation that people will draw, that if you did go to these good colleges, then you must be a good guy. So that way there is a default hypothesis that you must be good till proven wrong. So I would say that some of those things allowed me to get into those experiments, new things where people trusted me, saying, hey, this person must be good, so let me try him out in this thing which he has probably never tried before. So that, I think, opportunity came my way based on that. And maybe also because, I've been I think many a times what also happens is that, people call other people who they think are nice people, if I can say so, and not rude people. So I have not been rude to people. I've been generally nice. And therefore, maybe that has also added to people inviting me versus, let's say, if I was all of that, but I was a bit of a rude person, then maybe people may not still have not invited. So to me, the combination of some of those hard skills and some soft characteristics allowed people to invite me to some of those roles. Now, having come into those roles, I think my approach, again, this is all reflection, is that of a bit of a first principle. Try to define the role in the way that I think it needs to be defined versus take it as given. And that again has happened naturally. It wasn't as if I was trying to, change my JD or change the way it was. I would just go there, talk to a bunch of people, and then ask questions and say, hey, but can we not do it this way, or can we not define it this way, and things like that. So therefore, many of these roles, especially the data analytics one, in fact, even before that, my first sort of quote unquote, what I can say, enabling role or a change management role was a Six Sigma role. Because before that, I was, more of a direct contribution to consulting or to, underwriting and funding and giving deals, all of that. But the Six Sigma role was a real enabler change management role. How do you create a process improvement culture in the company? So I did get some exposure to an influencing type of a role back then. And therefore, after that, when data analytics or digital or any of these roles came my way, I started to interpret it as a lens of driving change. And any of those tools, whether it was Six Sigma or data or digital or anything, as a tool. Not that's not the end of it. So now driving change is all about influencing, driving outcomes, driving business, and so on and so forth. So my interpretation in all of those roles was, and I used to encapsulate that through a quotation I used to have in my Dell days. My first slide of my presentation used to say, and those days big data had become very big. And the quotation used to be, no one is interested in big data, but everyone is interested in big results. Quote Michael Dell. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether Michael said that or not, but it used to grab headlines, and I don't think anyone went and checked with Michael. And Michael may have also looked at it and said, yeah, sounds good. Maybe I might have said it. So I use that a lot to tell people that this is all about business. This is all about impact. And we should start with a business and a strategy lens. We should not start with a data lens, because many a time people would say, oh, you're a data guy, I'll give you all this data, tell me what to do. I said, no, let's figure out what your business is, what your strategy is. And then to enable your strategy, we will then use data to make it better. Now, that is the same principle that I have been using in my subsequent jobs. And therefore, in this whole change management job, there is technical skills and then there is soft and engagement skills. I think I did not grow up in those technical skills. Many of my colleagues in the industry were data scientists, data engineers, all of that. I didn't have that. I did attempt in my Dell days to acquire those skills. I enrolled for a Coursera course by Andrew Ang, which was very popular in those days, machine learning. Millions of people seem to have done it. I felt that I'm a smart guy, I'm an engineer. I could also do it because everyone was posting on LinkedIn that I've done a Andrew Ang course. After 1 hour, I realized that it asked me to download some software, some code, all of that. I said, I'm not really a software coding person. I actually enjoy the softer aspects of change management, engaging people, driving strategy, all of that. So therefore, even now in my current role, we are saying that in order to drive change, you have to think about the business strategy, where all can data and analytics help you drive your strategy better. So there's one element to it. Then there's change management related to culture, performance, talent, all of that. And then there is technology and tools. So I think my team has a lot of people who have those technical skills. Right now, I don't feel the need to know all the details of modeling techniques or programming techniques. I try to bring the business angle, the outside in angle, the change management angle to the PT. So I tell people that, let's all bring our capabilities together, and together we will, succeed. So I don't have to know what you know. You don't necessarily have to know what I know. Over time, we'll try to know each other better so that we can, engage together more comprehensively. But generally, the good old days when this organizations were hierarchical, when the boss had to know more than the guy below, is anyway gone. Because nowadays, I think everything is an ecosystem. Diverse skill sets are coming together in fusion teams, agile teams to deliver the outcome. And therefore, I find myself at a spot where my strategy, which is to bring my strengths to the table and connecting it to all other people's strengths, seems to be working out well. Maybe in the olden days this may not have worked out as well.
Yeah, no, fair point. So you know so I've been reading up, and people keep saying that various numbers are quoted, but people say 70 to 75, possibly 80% of analytics projects don't deliver on business expectations. There is a oft-repeated statement that I've heard business leaders saying, "This is information, where is the insight?" type of stuff. And then there is a part where if you look at two spectrums, two sides of the spectrum on analytics project, there is the one which is tactical, quick turnaround insights, which tells the business what they need to do type of stuff, literally actionable insights on which they can take action. And then there is a long, deep, AI model building or whatever, where, it's a multi-generation project, and then, it starts giving impact over a period of time, but maybe larger at scale and more deeper. So how do you see this? What do you think is, the role that each of them plays, and what is more, which do you think has got a bigger connect or impact or mind share with the business?
Yeah, I think I've started to become conscious of the terminology that we use. So analytics project or digital transformation, I sometimes think that some of these terminologies themselves may be causing the trouble. Because in my mind, again, like I said, business impact, business strategy, those are the only things that anyone in the business cares about. Now we have to translate all of what we are doing in terms of how do we create impact. So I would think that if someone goes to someone and said, I'll do an analytics projects, I would say that think of what is it that is important for that business, what value will it create, and then derive the project from there, versus saying just because we have a bunch of data, we have done some project and I'll show you some chart. So one of the things that we try to drive is to say, end of the day, analytics is here to enhance your decision making. Wherever there is data, you can probably take better decisions using that versus otherwise. But you got to figure out where all decisions need to be taken, how often they need to be taken, what is the decision-making model that you need to apply, and then the data can fit in. So many a times, I think what we fail to realize is that certain decisions have to be taken monthly and not daily. So many a time people are, let's say, sending daily reports, and I ask them that, what is this going to aid? And if the decision is monthly, maybe you are creating noise and confusing people and not giving them the signal. So if a decision has to be taken monthly, just give them a report at a monthly basis, show them the trend, and help them take the right decision. But if you're just sending a lot of reports, people don't know necessarily how to interpret it. They may get confused and they may react to random noise. So that happens a lot of time when people are, got a lot of data, they like making fancy charts and start publishing at a frequency, which is not the right frequency at which decision has to be taken. So therefore, coinciding the decision-making cycle to the data publishing, I think is a big area, which is very obvious in my head, but it seems to not happen in the same way. That's one. The second is we look at the impact of data and decision making in three different buckets in our businesses. We call it enablement, optimization, and transformation in higher order of difficulty. And enablement will be the simple stuff, you automate stuff and all of that. And what we find is that people tend to do that far more because it is easy, it is right here and now. And that is where, like I said, our generic approach to driving business strategies to say, you should have a data/digital ambition, some kind of a roadmap. And that roadmap ought to have things in all three buckets. There's a bunch of things, a lot of things which are in your enablement bucket because you need to automate stuff. But there has to be something in the optimization bucket, which is you are optimizing something for the long run. It might take a while to do it, but you still need to do it. And third is the transformation bucket, where you're trying something totally random or totally new, which hasn't been done before. And you might do a bunch of experiments, some may fail. But unless you try to do some transformational initiative, you will never transform, right? So therefore, we have created this framework to force people into doing things in a more systematic fashion so that they don't end up just doing a few things which are here and now, but think in all the three buckets and devote their time in all of these areas, devote their resources in all these areas so that they are building the organization or the function or the business for the long run.
Yeah. So, one of the so when we say that the analytics team or the transformation team is more aligned with the business, right? And obviously, business leaders or business people know the business far better than the people who are supporting them. That's the reality, and that comes a lot because of their being in the business and having a peripheral vision of what is really happening in the marketplace with competition and all that, right? And most of the work that again, for lack of a better word, the analytics or AI team or data science team does is about looking at what is there internally about the organization and trying to, like you said, optimize or create transformation. How important? But now there is an explosion of data. Not only is first-party data available, there are third-party data available. There is external secondary source of data available. How important do you see is the role of someone who's leading the transformation for organization or leading the whatever the analytics practice for organization to have the ability to really get outside in perspective? How important is it, and what are some of the approaches one could take to get there?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a sort of fallacy also, where it is generally assumed that the business people know business well. Because what we also find a lot these days is that many a time the business people also can be very siloed and may not think of certain things in an obvious fashion. And I think the smart business people are always asking that question and sometimes asking our team also, they're saying, are there anything else? The second thing is because a lot of data analytics, digital new age technologies are available, there are a few things which can be done very, very differently than what the business person can ever imagine. I mean, just imagine, I used to be working in a bank, Wells Fargo earlier on, and the mortgage process used to take 21 days for approval. And we have seen many manual processes in banks which are very long. And the new digital computers came along and who would, give an approval in like half an hour or whatever it is. And that has happened in the finance business. It has happened in many businesses. So many a time the traditional business people may not even imagine that it is possible to do something in such a short period of time or in a certain different way, which they had not even imagined. So I do think that a good discussion of maybe let's say analytics person or anyone from the outside of the business and the business person is important, and they have to continue to engage with each other, ask questions, come up with some conjectures on can this be possible, can that be possible, do some experiments, because these days frugal experimentation is possible. So sometimes if you're not sure, you can do a frugal experiment and check it out for yourself versus think whether it is possible or not. In the past, experimentation was very huge. So I do think that a very close connection between these two parties One who's bringing the outside perspective, maybe some technical perspective related to data analytics, digital on things can be done with this thing, and the business person closely working together, challenging each other, learning from each other is to be the recipe for success. I think gone are the days when, they tell you the problem and you solve it. Today, I think it has to be far more interactive. It has to be that agile fusion team, which is working in sprints, doing retrospectives, learning from that, going ahead, doing experimentations, changing course, all of that. So I think it's far more intimate now, where you have to work very closely together versus the waterfall way where someone gave you a problem, you went ahead, solved it, and came back.
Got it. So I used to call that word as reverse mentoring, in some sense, right? Which is essentially, now when I looked at reverse mentoring, it was about maybe experienced business leader working with youngsters and then brainstorming with them to say what is the art of the possible. But what you are saying is it needs to be more in the fabric of the way you collaborate and iterate in quick time, and then figure out what is the one that you want to drop, what is the one you want to scale.
Yeah, in fact, when we look at our world, I mean, if you look at very specific capabilities which have to come together to get an outcome, even within our own team, there's a data scientist who understands modeling. There's a data engineer who thinks how it can be automated. So within our team itself, there are these skills. Then within the business, there can be a salesperson or a logistics person or a marketing person. Then we have a bunch of partners outside, which can be in the nature of startups or consulting firms who are sometimes advising us. So we look at this as a huge ecosystem. Depending on the nature of the problem or where you are starting, it can be a bunch of different players who will come in. So therefore, to us, it's more of a interconnected fabric. No one is higher or lower than the other. In fact, to my mind, therefore, even the notion of reverse mentoring doesn't appeal to me, because there are multiple players at different points in time. They will bring different ideas to the table. They can be young or old, they can be whoever, they can gender, any gender. But I think it's just a free flowing of ideas of different perspectives coming together and making an outcome in a very agile, amoeba-like fashion is my imagination on how this will play out.
So, in one of your interviews, I was thinking, and I concur with that viewpoint where you said that we will have to move from being problem solvers to problem identifiers or opportunity identifiers, right? The expectation is people in the business possibly, whatever is in the face can possibly identify something. And, like you said, they can collaborate to see if there are larger boundaries that they can open. So, but then there are, increasingly from the way we used to analyze, now there are, learning models that are available. Now OpenAI is coming in, almost everything is getting treated as black box. So where, you put a input, and if you know how to give the input, you're likely to get the output. And, as a business person, then you start measuring up against, is it really delivering? Is it practical or not? Right? So how do you see this disrupting or changing the way the whole data science ecosystem will work?
Yeah, in fact, you reminded me. So this notion of being a problem definer and not a solver is something that I've been saying for quite a lot of years. And then when the ChatGPT came in last month or whenever, I said, see, I used to use the example of Kaggle in those days because I was in the data science field. I say, you know what, I can put this problem on Kaggle, and a Hungarian scientist who's getting bored will solve it for me free. Why do I need you? So I would kind of sometimes, make those sort of statements and provoke people around me. But now, people are now talking about ChatGPT and, Chat Sonic or any of these technologies. And I think now people realize that whatever can be articulated or defined can be automated. And you can also create, learning models and so on and so forth. So I think it is becoming more and more clear that the answers can be found in some of these technical ways. But the question now becoming more and more, what is worth solving? What is worth doing? How do we do the architecture? How do we think about this problem? So clearly, we are getting in the realm of more multidimensional thinking on what are we trying to do, what business are we in, and things of that nature. So I think people will be having more free time to focus on defining problem now than ever before, because as many of these things will get automated, they can find the answers from those places, which I think would be the more creative part, because I would feel that human beings will find more satisfaction being more creative, and some of these unknowns will be the creative area where we will discuss with each other, we'll come up to some conclusion, we'll come up with some experimentation, all that. I think it will be fun for people. No one needs to be scared that ChatGPT has come in. I think we should be proud that we have a tool, we have a assistant who can help automate some of our tasks, which leaves us with more time to think about the more broader picture of the business or the society.
So given that, do you think, currently the type of, professionals that are coming in and the type of education system we've got a lot of data science and data engineering courses and all that. Are they really being taught or groomed to think outside the box? Or are they, is there a limitation there, you think? So I'll just give you so when I was at TESCO, we had a brilliant team internally, right? And we used to pride ourselves on exactly what you said. We could solve any problem, right? I mean, they were all super smart. And I used to always feel that these guys deserve a lot more than, what possibly the guys in the UK were getting. And then I was posted there. And when I saw that they were obviously not as technically brilliant or IQ-wise anywhere near the team that I had in India. But I always felt that their ability to define a market opportunity or, have a big picture was far higher. So they took the higher stage in terms of defining a problem and then it ended up getting the Indian team to solve it for them. So, they were almost articulating the higher order problem and we ended up solving it in some sense, right? So do you think the current set of analysts who are coming again, I hear a lot of them saying I know this platform, that platform, modeling, all that. But is there a room for them to be groomed in that particular thing? Is there a gap you see?
Good point, Maha. In fact, you bring a good point. I think we tend to, again, in many ways, think in binaries, either or. But I think we all realize that the world is all about ands and not ors. There's nothing that does not need to exist. So I would say that the same data scientist, they need to acquire new skills. I keep using the term that, they use the term full stack engineer and so on. I say you have to become a full stack human being. You need to acquire a lot of other skills and continue to add those skills so that you can become that. So you are adding to it. You're not, reducing it. At the same time, I do think that there is a problem that if so maybe using your TESCO example or some other example, if someone has just one perspective, which is just the business perspective and not the other, then also there's trouble, because they are unable to conceptualize what all technology can do. So I would think that someone who has come up the ranks, who has understood technology, they are better able to creatively think about what technology can do to the business. So I would like a more full stack person than a single stack person, because that single stack will be sort of constrained in their creativity. Imagine if we had just learned one subject, then we'll be thinking in that one subject only. But if we have learned many other subjects, and we all see that many of the famous inventors and scientists of yesteryears were not bounded by STEM or any discipline. In fact, more often than not, most of them were polyglots. They would know philosophy and music and maths and all of that. And they didn't choose science between science and humanities. So I do think that we'll probably come back to what some of us have seen in the past, where people are more multidimensional and different people will have different strengths. So like I said, in my own case, my strength is more on the softer skills, or at least that's what I enjoy doing. So I will have more of that, less of some of those data science and data engineering. Someone else can have much of that, less of this, and then together we can come up to the right mix. So I do think that, but every individual should try and have more and more, and not believe that they can be just single dimensional and hopefully engage with all others and make it happen, because I think their creativity will be constrained if their various pores of different varieties haven't been opened through that education.
Absolutely. And like you rightly said, everyone can't be everything, and you need collaboration. Now that brings to me to the next question. So right now remote work is catching up big time, right? Like you mentioned earlier, you need the creative side and the logical side and a sense of peripheral vision to really solve, right, and collaborate. So how do you, and that is on one side. On the other side, there are a lot of people wanting to, there's a lot of freelancer migration at least happening in the US and all that. So it is going to a stage where most organizations or all organizations may not have all the skills available, within the team itself, right? So how do you see this working across organizations, collaborating across organizations, working within the organization, collaborating with people outside? How do you see collaboration beyond the extent, into the extended enterprise or beyond the enterprise happening?
Yeah, I think, many of these cloud models of working, I mean, obviously the cloud first came to technology, but now it is coming to the talent side as well. And I think to me, cloud is nothing but atomization of pretty much everything. I mean, if you think about it, everything used to be monolithic back in the day, and now everything is getting atomized, right? Even, technology became atomized first through the cloud. Talent is getting atomized through this gig worker, so I think it is very flexible. I mean, manufacturing is getting atomized through 3D printing and so on and so forth. So I think the whole flexibility that this atomization provides is great. I think, and you can start anywhere, you can build from anywhere, the costs are lower, the flexibility is higher. So I think that this is just the order of the day, that as technology progresses, I think everything will become just building blocks. It's like our, microservices and API based architecture. That is what is, happening at a macro level across the board, that small units of capabilities are being created. And then there are people who are going to, bring in together like Lego blocks at will and create other blocks. And that is happening to the talent marketplace also. However, having said that, I do think that you still need some people to be the architects of this whole utilizing this atomization. While it is a good resourcing strategy, but you still need some architects to think how, what, how much, how many, when, and so on and so forth. So I think from a resourcing perspective, that's a great thing, but that doesn't mean that you don't need a major architect or people with those types of skills to bring it all together. So I do think that we need both. And many a times I think that we are not building enough of that, the architects, the thinkers who are going to be able to bring all of these things together, because that is where the value will get created. Because the other parts are resources, they are creating value, but not extraordinary value. I think the value is in the combination of those at the right place at the right time, and the presentation of that to the customers or to the users in the right way and the right time. I think that is where the whole system thinking, design thinking, architecture thinking, those types of things will become more and more critical, which to me is important. And I think the market will force us to get there. Today, I think, see, everything, some of these things that we are talking about are sort of futuristic. So it's a trend. The current market may not, be reflecting that. But clearly, we know that if that is the trend, let us be the first to get on to that trend before we are forced to follow the trend, is the way I would think about it.
So thank you so much for your insightful inputs. I had just last couple of questions. So what would you, if you had to look back, what would you advise what would your advice be to Pankaj Rai 30 years back?
Yeah, so I think many a times when such questions are asked on, what is your regret, or what would you do differently, all of that, I am unable to relate to those questions, because in my mind, in that context, me or anyone else probably did the best they could based on available information, based on available intellect, based on available whatever. So the way I think about some of these things is that the context keeps changing very rapidly, and therefore we need to be able to catch the new context and change. Now, if I were to just look at the previous 30 years and the next 30 years, and my advice to my daughter, and I don't know whether you saw one of the videos or one of my chats where I spoke about a 5C framework. And the 5C framework was derived from future trends, and the future trends were related to, deglobalization, multi sort of dimensional, changes, and abundance, and so on and so forth. And I was saying that these trends are very different from the past. We are moving from scarcity to abundance. We are moving to linearity to, multidimensional. We are moving from globalization to deglobalization. So these big changes have to change our mental models. And therefore, this 5C framework is really about what is going to be in short supply, high demand. And you need to acquire those characteristics to be able to play in that world and not get stuck in the mental models of the past. So it was really about curiosity, compassion, conviction, creativity, communication, those types of things. And there's a sort of a story behind it and a derivation behind it. But the point there was that look at trends, look at what is needed, and latch on to it versus continue to focus on the past. The other, humorous example that I tend to give my friends is that, think of two main things that human beings consume, which is food and information, one for the tummy and one for the mind. Now look at the concept of scarcity and abundance. In both these cases, you and I think, pretty much can say we grew up in a bit of a scarcity age. So when we went to a buffet, we will eat it all as if there was no tomorrow. And when we found a television, we would watch even Krishi Darshan or any other program because it was made available to us. Now, both of those things are just available, forever for any number of this thing we can do. So if we were to apply the same mental model, one, we'll become fat in the tummy and mentally ill in the mind. So therefore, the new strategy ought to be that, you got to, it's all available. So you seek it out when you need it. So when you're hungry, please eat food. When you need information, please go seek it on Google or ChatGPT. But you don't have to keep consuming it endlessly and get addicted to your WhatsApp, or you don't have to keep eating just because someone invited you to a buffet. Now, it's easier said than done because the mental models have been, almost hard-coded in our mind, and we don't know how to change. So this is just an example to say, keep thinking of how the context is changing and how some of the models that we have seen to be, gospel truth need to be revisited. The other one I was telling my daughter who studied economics was that we were never taught about negative interest rates or negative price of oil. But we have seen it happen in our lifetime. This wasn't taught to us. So many, many things will happen as the context changes, and we need to be, ready for it. Many of the marketing theories and models were built on limitation or constraints on shelf space. The digital models will say there's no constraint. So many of your models are no longer relevant, and new models are relevant. So I just think that we need to keep applying our first principle to say how is the context change, and are we inadvertently using an older model which is no longer valid and maybe getting wrong results and wondering why.
Valid. So essentially, you're saying person has to stay curious, mentally agile, and continue to adapt. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely great. Thanks, Pankaj, once again, for making time. And this is the first episode that we are doing. And what better than reach out to a old friend for help. And thank you for making time.
Anytime, Maha. Thank you so much.